For about 2 decades, completely hidden from the public eye, the CIA was fighting a secret war. But this wasn't on some foreign battlefield. Nope. This war was being fought on the terrain of the human mind itself. So today we're going to dive deep into this really dark chapter of American history, the top secret mind control program we now know as MKUltra. From 1953 all the way to 1973, America's top intelligence agency ran literally hundreds of clandestine experiments. They were looking for a key, a drug, a special technique, maybe even a weapon that could unlock and control human behavior. It was a quest that would have devastating and, in some cases, truly deadly consequences. So where do we start? Well, our story kicks off not with a spy or some foreign enemy, but with one of the CIA's very own, a brilliant scientist whose final tragic days would begin to unravel the first threads of this massive conspiracy.
I've made a terrible mistake. Chilling words, right? So what was this terrible mistake? That is the question that just hangs over this entire story, because only days after he said this to his wife, Frank Olson would be dead. And the official story, well, it wouldn't even come close to the truth.
See, Olson was a top bacteriologist working on some of the CIA's most sensitive projects. During a secret retreat, his own supervisor, the head of MKUltra, a guy named Sidney Gottlieb, spiked his drink with LSD. What followed were 9 days of intense paranoia and distress, which ended with Olson plunging from the 13th floor of a New York hotel. The government just called it a suicide. It would take decades for a much, much more sinister picture to finally emerge. And here's the thing. Olson's death wasn't just some isolated incident. It was the lethal result of a huge institutional program that had been growing in secrecy and ambition for years. So let's take a look at the actual network that made all of this possible.
To really get MKUltra, you've got to understand the Cold War paranoia it came from. The CIA was terrified that the Soviets and others were using mind control to brainwash American POWs. They felt like they were falling behind and they had to catch up fast. So their efforts actually started before MKUltra. You had projects like Bluebird and Artichoke, which were already exploring interrogation with hypnosis and drugs. But by 1953, the ambition just exploded. The scope widened, and the whole operation got a new name and a nearly unlimited off-the-books budget to test on unwitting citizens: MKUltra.
Now, what's really wild about this is just how explicit their goal was. I mean, this isn't speculation. This is from a declassified CIA memo. They were literally asking if they could create a real-life Manchurian candidate, an unwitting assassin, a programmable human being. It's just incredible.
So, what was MKUltra officially? Well, for 20 years, it was the CIA's big umbrella project for all kinds of research into behavioral modification. And that involved everything you can imagine: hypnosis, sensory deprivation, even radiation, and, of course, most famously, giving psychedelic drugs to unsuspecting American citizens.
Okay, this is a really crucial point. The CIA didn't do all of this dirty work themselves. They were smart. They created a secret network, outsourcing the research to over 80 different institutions. We're talking respected universities, hospitals, and prisons that became the unwitting and sometimes very witting laboratories for these incredibly dangerous experiments. Now, to test their wild theories, the CIA needed subjects. And as one director put it, they didn't have any human guinea pigs of their own. So they went out and found them. People like Harold Blauer, a professional tennis player who checked into the New York State Psychiatric Institute back in '52 just looking for help with depression. He had absolutely no idea the institute had a secret contract with the U.S. Army. So instead of getting therapy, Blauer was secretly injected with a derivative of mescaline, a really powerful hallucinogen codenamed EA-1298. On January 8, 1953, even though he was begging them to stop the treatments, they gave him one final, absolutely staggering dose, 450 milligrams. He went into convulsions and was dead within 2 hours. And for 22 years, his death was completely covered up. The official story was just a tragic accidental overdose. But decades later, a 1987 court ruling finally revealed the truth. The judge literally described Blauer as a guinea pig and found that his medical records had been deliberately falsified to hide the real cause of death, a secret government experiment. Blauer's case really just shows how deep this institutional complicity went. I mean, this stuff wasn't just happening in some secret underground bunkers. It was happening in the halls of America's most prestigious academic centers. Harvard, Stanford, Columbia, McGill in Canada.
these weren't just names on some list. They were active sites for MKUltra subprojects. The sterling reputations of these institutions provided the absolute perfect cover for research that could never, ever have been done out in the open. I mean, just look at the sheer scope of this work. For Subproject 39, psychiatric inmates in Michigan were being used to try and develop a truth serum. Over at Stanford, for Subproject 86, researchers were trying to build tiny lie detectors you could use on people without them knowing. And get this, at the University of Maryland, Subproject 119 was trying to control behavior remotely with brain implants. Each one was just a different road to the exact same terrifying destination: control. So, within this network of complicit institutions, there were individual researchers who took the CIA's goals to just terrifying extremes, and probably none more so than a very highly respected psychiatrist up in Canada. Let me introduce you to Dr. Donald Ewen Cameron. Now, this guy wasn't some fringe scientist working out of his basement. He was the president of the World Psychiatric Association. From his post at McGill University and with secret funding from the CIA, he developed a truly brutal system for completely breaking down the human mind. He called his theory depatterning. First, he'd put patients into drug-induced comas, sometimes for months at a time. Then, he'd hit them with massive, repeated electroshock treatments to essentially wipe their memories clean. And finally, something he called psychic driving, where patients were forced to listen to looped audio messages for up to 20 hours a day to try and implant new ideas. The result wasn't to cure. It was absolute destruction. This quote describes what happened to one of Dr. Cameron's patients, Gail Kastner. She went to him for help as a 19-year-old honors student. She left with her entire personality erased, reduced to an infantile state, and she was just one of many who were permanently, horribly damaged by these experiments. You know, the methods of MKUltra were crude, they were brutal, and in the end, they were considered a failure. But the ambition behind it all, that never really went away. It just waited for the technology to catch up. Just look at this. The technology we have today to read and write to the human brain, things like brain-computer interfaces, it is light years beyond the clunky electroshock machines and crude drugs of the 1950s. The level of precision is just on a completely different planet, which, as you can imagine, raises some really profound questions. So why don't we know more about all this? Well, it's pretty simple. When the Watergate scandal broke, the CIA panicked. In 1973, the director, Richard Helms, ordered every single file related to MKUltra to be destroyed. After 2 decades and millions of dollars, the program hadn't produced a reliable truth serum or any programmable assassins. It was a massive scientific failure, an ethical nightmare, and a huge embarrassment they needed to bury fast. But did the ambition die when the program did? Take a look at this quote. It's not from 1952, it's from a 2008 Defense Intelligence Agency report. They are asking the exact same questions the architects of MKUltra asked, only now they're asking them in the context of modern neurotechnology. So the crucial question we're all left with is this. MKUltra failed because its tools were basically sledgehammers. But today, the tools are becoming scalpels. As technology gives us this unprecedented access to the brain, we have to ask ourselves, could the ultimate goal of MKUltra, the precise control of the human mind, finally be within reach? And if it is, who's making sure it's never attempted again?